Hello and welcome back. Come sit for a spell and join me around the cauldron where we talk about witchcraft, polytheism, and everyday life as a modern witch. If you're new here, hello. My name is Megan and I am the witch here around the cauldron. In today's episode, I'm going to be answering questions from you. I asked for questions on Blue Sky, in my newsletter, on Spells 8, and I think here on YouTube in the community tab. So I have some questions and we're just going to answer them as I sit here and drink my coffee. So let's hop right into it. So I have my questions here on the tablet, and I like doing these kinds of Q&A videos and podcast episodes because it really lets me know what's on your mind. And Around the Cauldron was born out of helping other people and myself find answers to their questions and general information about Wicca originally and witchcraft and polytheism in general. So I do want to make Q&A style episodes a sort of regular thing, but to do a Q&A, you got to have questions. So I was thinking about doing one like every couple of months, every month if I have enough questions. If I have enough questions to do one every month, that's not going to be the podcast episode every month like this one currently is for the end of April 2025, because that's not how I want to do it. So anyway, I will be creating a form on my website so that I can collect questions at any point in time, and then I can gather them all together when I have enough and do another Q&A video. So look for that in the description and in the show notes if that's something that you're interested in doing, or if you have a question and you didn't get a chance to ask it. But we're going to move right into the questions. I have several here, not too many, so I'm not sure how long this episode's going to be, but let's just jump right into it. The first question comes from Pumpkin Mosey, and they asked this question here on the YouTube community tab. It says, advice for building relationships with Irish deities / spirituality from outside Ireland. That's something I struggle with sometimes. Also, give us any good book recs you've come across recently, please. So thank you for your question. Advice for building relationships with Irish deities when you're outside of Ireland is, it's going to be the same as building a relationship with any deity. I don't personally think that you have to have a physical connection to the land that the deities are from unless they are specifically tied to the land, such as Danu. I believe it's Danu is specifically tied to the island of Ireland. Not entirely sure on that one, so don't quote me. But I do know that Irish deities have taken on so many different forms. It's either Courtney Weber's book about Bridget or Morgan Daimler's book about Bridget. It talks about several different aspects of Bridget from outside of Ireland, and I think one of them even speaks about Maman Brigitte, who is a Loa. Now, I don't know too much about that, but all of that to say that building a relationship with a deity, no matter where they're from, just takes time and work. And a lot of what is presented on social media makes it sound very physical. Like people talk about hearing their deities or feeling their deities, and not everyone interacts with gods like that. I don't necessarily hear Bridget, right? I don't necessarily feel her presence anytime I am praying or worshiping or asking for her help with something or giving her an offering. It definitely is a reciprocal relationship where, it's a give and take. And my experience with Irish deities is that they're very transactional. Makes it sound like you're buying something, right? but they're not always there. They have their own things that they're doing and their own sort of domains that they cover, right? They have lives of their own. So finding a connection with an Irish deity outside of Ireland is, I don't want to say just as easy as it is to connect with any other deity, but it's the same. And I think it might just take a shift in perspective. Yes, I have been told that it is easier to connect with them when you are in Ireland and that the land itself just feels different and feels more magical and divinely connected. But I've never experienced that for myself, so I can't really speak to that. But what helped me when I was first developing a relationship with Bridget, and I feel like I should give like a disclaimer here that I no longer work with gods on a regular basis. So I don't give offerings, I don't work with deities, I don't pray to deities. I may occasionally ask for help from Bridget, but it is not a regular thing like it used to be. And that has just come from my own personal growth and development in my practice and my beliefs. But the one thing that helped me when I was developing a relationship with Bridget was just to have something on a routine basis. Daily prayers, weekly offerings, a daily divination practice, or just something consistent. It doesn't even have to be daily, but having that routine build up and be something that you do regularly, it gave me the perspective and the right mindset to understand the connection that I was building and to really feel the difference on between the days where I did my consistent practice versus when I didn't. And in the beginning, when I would pray or ask for help, the difference in the way that I felt and the way the energy felt versus like months later when I was asking for help and the response was more noticeable. Not necessarily like physically noticeable with myself, what I was hearing or feeling or thinking, but energetically it was just a little different. So I'm not sure that's really the advice that you were looking for, but consistency is definitely key when it comes to that. And then the second part of your question, any good books that I've come across recently? I am going to be 100% honest with you, and I have not been reading very much lately at all. I have just gotten out of my spring semester of college, so the last, 8 months has been occupied with microbiology textbooks and anatomy and physiology textbooks. I have not read very much at all when it comes to spirituality or witchcraft or anything like that. What I can tell you is that I'm currently reading a book called The Women of the Dawn. And this is very local, very, very regional for me and my practice. And it is about 4 Wabanaki women in Maine and their stories. And that's part of me learning the land that I live on and the history behind my region. And this is part of my process for connecting to a new place because, I haven't lived here for very long, just a little over a year at this point, and that is one of my goals for this year, is to learn more about where I live and not necessarily the magical or the spiritual practices, because I am not looking to practice any sort of indigenous spirituality, but it is a good idea to have an understanding of the folklore of the region, because the folklore of the region will give you insight into the energy of the region, and then you can build from there. So I'm sorry I don't really have any book recommendations right now. If I if I hope to do some more reading this summer. So I will definitely keep everyone updated on whatever books I'm reading. Make sure that you follow my blog, and you can sign up for my newsletter, because I tend to do book reviews on my website instead of video reviews about them. It's just much easier for me to write it all out than it is to sit here and talk about a book. So that is where you can find my book reviews and my thoughts on different books. All right. The next question comes from Chris. Chris, I'm not sure what your handle is on YouTube anymore. It is escaping my brain, but I will link Chris's channel in the description and in the show notes, because he is also a practicing pagan, and he did work with Bridget the last time we spoke. I've interviewed Chris before. Anyway, on Blue Sky, he asked me this question. Has the knowledge you've gained from school had any effect on your craft, such as how you approach any kind of spell work, or has your craft been pretty much unaffected? I think this is an amazing question, because I am going to nursing school, right? So I don't officially start the program until next fall, so this coming school year, and the classes that I have been taking have just been have been me finishing the prereqs that I didn't have from my previous degree. So I've been taking anatomy and physiology, microbiology. I had to take a psychology class. But I would say currently for this school year that just ended, my craft hasn't really been affected too much by what I've learned. But I think that's just because I've taken like anatomy and physiology before. It was just too long ago for it to count for this current, the nursing program. It was like almost 15 years ago at this point. So it didn't count anymore and whatever. But I think having an understanding of how the human body works and the way that it is laid out, for example, definitely not necessarily gives me a leg up, but it definitely helps when it comes to healing magic or any magic that targets a specific bodily function or part of the body. So, for example, many years ago, one of my family members ended up in the hospital from a heart attack. And before we ended up going to the hospital to visit them, I did a healing spell. And in the process of the healing spell, I was able to visualize what the heart looks like and understand the differences between the atria and the ventricles and the different valves and where the arteries and veins and stuff all go. And I feel like I was able to target the issue better rather than just doing a general healing spell. I could specifically target the area of the cardiovascular system that was having issues. And that particular family member is perfectly fine now. They have healed from that and they're healthy and whatnot. But it goes back to the concept of, understanding how something works and why something works gives you a better chance of having an effect on the thing. So like my car, right? I always go back to cars. I don't understand how the engine works, so I can't even begin to diagnose or fix it. That's what the mechanic is for. But if I gain that knowledge and I start to understand the inner workings of the engine, then I'm better equipped to diagnose issues and correct or fix anything that is broken or messed up. I apply the same sort of logic to my magical practice. Once I understand how something functions, then it is easier for me to have an effect on it. And I can imagine that that's only going to become easier or more enhanced the further along I get in my studies and when I get into the actual field of nursing, into a career. Because right now, I have the basic understandings of anatomy and physiology, microbiology and viruses and bacteria and stuff. I know how to take blood pressure manually. I know how to check for a pulse. I'm CPR certified. But going into the program specifically and getting actual hands-on clinical experience and understanding with the way that different things work and how different things are done is only going to further my ability to perform like powerful healing magic. That's one of the only ways that I can see it right now. I do want to specifically go into labor and delivery nursing or hospice nursing. I haven't fully decided yet. Like I said, I have no clinical experience, so I can't make up my mind completely on that because I haven't done any of it yet and I haven't had that exposure. But I can absolutely see my spiritual practice and my magical practice having an effect on the way I practice medicine as a nurse. So I think it's only going to get better from here. And I think anyone can apply that type of logic to their witchcraft practice. I don't know, like if you're a meteorologist, I'm just picking something out of the air, and you understand how weather works and how storms are formed, then like I would never personally try to work with something as major as the weather, but you might have a better understanding of how to slightly manipulate the energy of the atmosphere to push a storm in a different direction, or to calm down the atmospheric pressure to make a storm less intense, or something like that. That's kind of the same logic that I'm applying from nursing to magic. Okay, the next question is kind of long. I will read the whole thing because it's got some context. This one came from Coffee Makeup Stationery in the YouTube community tab. It says, I have a sister-in-law who has passed. She's been gone for a few years. We were very close when she first came into the family, but we fell apart and we had differing ideas about things, and I'm sure she would not approve of my current spirituality practices, as her husband is an old Tom Baptist preacher in the same type of church that we used to belong to years ago. But all of a sudden, I've been thinking of her more and more often. I know folks sometimes work with their ancestors. What would you say if someone would want to try to connect with a loved one who has passed, but most certainly would not approve of anything like this? Is it possible? How would someone go about doing that? If you were to ask me why I want to do it, I have no earthly idea. I just feel this pull to connect with her. I believe deep down she was a really good person. We just did not see eye to eye toward the end of her life, especially when we fell out of that type of church. Okay, so first, my condolences. I'm sorry for your loss. Second, is it possible to connect with someone who has passed on that might not approve or might not have approved of your practices while they were alive? Absolutely. The only way that you're really going to know is if you do it. If you try to connect with her, and it's possible that she wants nothing to do with your practices, and that, that's her prerogative. Whether she is on the physical plane or not, she still has free will and is capable of making her own decisions. It's been my experience that once someone passes on, the constraints of religion and dogma are not as strong. So, let's see. My grandmother was a Mormon when she was alive, and she definitely didn't approve of my polytheistic beliefs and my witchcraft practice, but it wasn't something that she outright forbid, or we weren't on bad terms or anything, but it's not something that she really approved of. I haven't felt pulled to connect with her in an ancestral veneration type of situation, but I do think about her often. She is the one who taught me how to crochet. She's the one who got me interested in food preservation and baking, and she's been gone for about 5 years at this point. And like I said, I think about her often. As far as working with her as an ancestor in my practice, that's not something I do too much with her or any other ancestor. It's something that I have wanted to explore for myself. I just haven't, honestly, I haven't had the time and the mental bandwidth. But it is absolutely possible to do it. And to start building that connection, I would start with creating like an ancestor altar. I have a video on my YouTube channel where I created an ancestor altar that I worked occasionally. I'll leave a link in the description and the show notes if you want to check those out. But it can be as simple as a shelf in your house that has some pictures, some things that make you think of her, a candle maybe, or some incense. You can leave little trinkets or offerings, and you just use that space to get into the mindset of connecting with her and thinking of her. You can invite her into the space and say, hey, like, if you're around, I would love to work with you and still have you in my life, and you are welcome to come to this space anytime. And like I said, it's really going to depend on what she chooses to do and if she's even ready to come back to like the physical plane as a spirit. Some spirits are. They are okay with coming back a few years after their physical passing. Some, it takes them longer to process their death and do things that they feel like they need to do as a spirit before they interact with their family or watch their family from afar. And as far as if she's going to approve of it or not, again, you're really not going to know until you start trying to build that connection with her. And even if she chooses not to directly work with you in that sort of ancestral work type of situation, that doesn't mean that you still can't connect with her mindfully and spiritually through an ancestor altar, and just sort of let her know, like, hey, I am still thinking of you. You mean a lot to me, and I miss you, and this thing I found made me think of you, and I'm gonna put it here for a little bit, and I hope you like it. You don't necessarily need to have a back and forth conversation or connection like that for you to feel connected to your ancestors and stay spiritually connected to the people that have passed on. When you continue to build this sort of relationship and connection, you might find in the future, over consistent practice, that the connection builds and deepens, and maybe she changes her mind, and maybe she does join you, and maybe she does help you in different things that you ask for help with. But it's going to come down to consistency and whether or not she really wants to do it. I will leave some information in the description and in the show notes for different ancestor practices, and I might have a blog post somewhere about making an ancestor altar or how to go about doing that. I don't remember off the top of my head what I have, so whatever I do have access to, I will leave in the description and in the show notes for you to go check out if you want. Okay, the next question comes from Tracy from the Spellsate forum. Hi, Tracy. She says, oops, what is my tablet doing? No. She says, I think I'd be interested in how the transition from Celtic pagan to folklore is going. Do you get any pull from the gods to go back? Just musing really, as I think you've evolved your practice from several traditions over the years. Were you once Wiccan too, or did I mix you up with someone else? This would be a wonderful exploration. Yes, I was once Wiccan. When I first started out, Wicca was the first thing that I found in my early teens. That's really what all of the popular books were about, was Wicca. Scott Cunningham and Dorothy Morrison and Silver Ravenwolf. But yeah, I have explored a lot of different pathways over the course of my life since discovering paganism and witchcraft. The transition from Celtic paganism to a more folk-based and land-based practice has been an interesting one because, I have been focused on Brigid and Irish polytheism for the last several years. And while I was never a Celtic Reconstructionist, I do find value in historical and academic sources and what was done before and how I can continue that sort of practice now. But moving into a more folk-based practice, I felt kind of stagnant. It's just been sort of like, okay, what am I supposed to do now? Because I had routine and I had consistency and I had prayers that I was saying and Sabbats that I was celebrating. But in the last several months of considering myself a Celtic pagan, that connection just sort of fell out, and it wasn't really where I felt my spirit being called to. So now I am back in learning mode, pretty much, because I've only lived in the state that I live in for about a year. And the first year that you live in a new place, it's just getting used to how everything works and seeing like the seasons and what's different here versus other places that I've lived, learning the different flora and fauna and what is near me versus what is not, different dangerous animals and plants versus what I can touch and what I should like leave alone for sacredness sake. It's a lot of listening and observing the energies and less ritualistic, less doing, less planning, if we'll say it that way. I do like that I already have a foundation of sort of building my own wheel of the year from when I lived in Florida, because I kind of did the same thing when I lived there, because Florida's seasons are kind of backwards and wacky, and like the growing season is off from the rest of the year just because of the climate. So I already have the foundation of paying attention to where I am and the seasonal shifts and the differences in energies. It's more of getting to know the spirit of place. And that honestly has been a little difficult for me. And I think honestly it's just because I've been in school. Moving up here has been a transition, like capital T transition for myself, but also everybody else in my family. It was rough for a while there. And that's for a variety of reasons. But now that I've been here for a full year and I have let go of the ties to a structured practice, I'm finding myself more able to fluidly move through different things. I follow the moon cycles, but I don't feel obligated to do anything for them if I don't need to. If I need to cast a spell, I'm gonna gather what I have in my house, or I'm going to just sit down and do it without any tools, or do it with a candle and that's it. I talked about that in my last podcast episode, where it is absolutely possible to work magic with no ingredients and just learning how to manipulate energy. I don't know. It's been interesting. It hasn't been very exciting. Like, I don't think talking about it is very exciting because it's a whole lot of what looks like nothing from the outside. It's lighting a candle or standing outside with my eyes closed, feeling the breeze on my face and the sunshine, right? That's what it's been so far. And that's only going to develop further. And I think it definitely plays into my studies as well, because folk-based practice is practice of the people. And as a future nurse, that's going to be a large part of who I am. Healing or allowing people to die with dignity. And so connecting myself, my desires, and my passions that I have with my practice has been an interesting transition, because I'm learning about who I am and what I want and what I find to be important over what the gods want, or what the gods are connected to, or what holidays I have been told that I need to celebrate because they're sacred. That has kind of dissipated. I get to decide what is sacred and important to me. And I really like that part of being a more folk-based practitioner and witch. And I don't even know if I can call myself a polytheist anymore. I mean, yes, I do still believe in the gods. I do still understand and know that they are there. So maybe I would call myself a polytheist, but not a pagan. I don't know anymore. It is what it is. All right, the next question came from someone in my newsletter. I don't have a name, but if this is your question, then here's your answer. It says, do you think it is a good thought to venture into the dark side and experience it to further your craft? So I'm not sure exactly what you mean by the dark side. I'm going to assume you mean baneful practices like curses and hexes and jinxes and whatnot. And I don't think it's necessary for you to explore and actively do those types of practices if you don't want to. If they go against your ethical code or your moral guidelines, then there's no point in exploring them if it's just gonna make you feel like crap, you know? Do I think that it's a good thing to understand the way that they work so that you can counteract them or protect against them? Yes. So if by explore you mean educate yourself on different curses and baneful practices, then yes. But no, I don't think it's necessary for you to actually do them in order to further your craft. You can further your craft and get better and more experienced in your practice by doing all kinds of things. You don't necessarily need to explore baneful magic or the quote-unquote darker side of witchcraft. And the darker side of witchcraft is going to be subjective for everyone. It's going to depend on what you find dark versus what someone else finds dark. And the last set of questions, I have 3. They all came from the same person, and they all revolve around incantations. So these questions came from Jason. Jason sent me an email, so thank you for your questions. I will answer them one by one, but again, they do all revolve around incantations. The first one says, do I need to recite an incantation each time I perform a magical cleansing of any type on an item? The short answer is no. You don't need to recite an incantation every time you perform a cleansing on any type of item. I don't generally use incantations when I cleanse things anyway. I use either sound. I have a bell. I have it here. I have a bell for sound cleansing. For those on YouTube, this is what it looks like. Or those watching the video on Spotify, I guess you can do that now. This is what it looks like, and that's what it sounds like. I will use that to cleanse. You can use crystals to cleanse. I have a selenite tower that I have used to cleanse things before. This just sits on my desk, and I don't know if it really does anything for me or if it just keeps things neutral. I don't tend to use a lot of crystals in my practice. They're pretty, but that's just about it for me. I also do a lot of cleansing with smoke, so incense and different herbs and whatnot, or music or whatever. But I mean, you can say an incantation if that's what you feel called to do. If you have a very specific intention, such as cleansing the energy of one person off of an item, but not the energy of anybody else who has touched it, or vice versa, then I would say an incantation, or like think the incantation in my mind as I am moving the energy and cleansing the item. But it's not necessary every time. The second question says, do incantations need to contain some rhyming words? I'm capable of creating my own incantations for witchcraft practices, but am not good in finding rhyming words to go with them. No, again, like you don't have to rhyme if you don't want to. Some people find it very easy. Some people find it impossible. I like rhyming incantations, but I also really like poetry and flowery language. I guess my mouth does not want to work correctly right now. So if I'm going to say an incantation or a chant, I do like for it to rhyme, but it doesn't always have to. You can literally just speak your incantation or speak your intention as your incantation if you choose to do so. It can be that simple. If you want it to rhyme, there's a website I have used since I was a teenager writing poetry in my journal when I was all angsty and depressed, to find rhyming words, and I'm pretty sure it's still around. It is called rhymezone.com, and you can type a word in there that you want to find a rhyming word for, and you can sort it by syllables. So if you want something to rhyme with chair, right? You put chair in there and it will come up with a whole list of words that rhyme with it, and it can be broken down into syllables like hair, pear, aware, you know, whatever comes up. So if you want your incantations to rhyme, you can absolutely use something like that, some sort of tool to help you. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, your incantations don't have to rhyme at all. And then the third question from Jason says, is it okay to write out incantations on a sheet of paper and read from it during the magical working? It's challenging for me to memorize my own written words of incantation within a short period of time. Absolutely. If you need to write it down, write it down. I mean, if it's something that you are performing on a regular basis, eventually you will memorize it. But there is no harm in having notes or having things written down ahead of time to help make things easier for you. You will be much better equipped to perform whatever you're doing if you have prepared ahead of time and you don't have to worry about memorizing something. When you're worried about memorizing things, your mind is elsewhere, right? Your focus is scattered. You might not be grounded effectively. You might not be able to connect with the energy of whatever you're doing because you're so focused on trying to remember what you need to say. So having that preparation ahead of time lets you free up that mental space to focus on what you need to focus on. Using notes, writing things down ahead of time is absolutely okay. I mean, people take their entire book of shadows or grimoires with them. There's nothing wrong with that. Apparently I'm running out of memory on my phone to record, which is fine because that was the last question. So I'm gonna do this outro super, super quick. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, watching this episode if you're watching. Find all of my links in the description. Follow me on social media. Subscribe on YouTube and the podcast wherever you listen or watch. Sign up for my newsletter. I give away a free tarot reading once a month to newsletter subscribers. What else do I have to say? Check out the description and the show notes for the form to submit questions if you want to ask a question for the next Q&A video. And yeah, I'm excited to be sitting back here in front of the camera and microphone recording again. I am out for summer and I am hoping to get into some sort of content routine because I have missed doing this while I have been busy with school. Speaking of content, the podcast is going to stay witchcraft focused. My YouTube channel is going to be, honestly, whatever I feel like doing because it is everyday life as a modern witch and I am more than just a witch. So I will likely be doing vlogs and fiber arts and whatever else I decide to do. So that is that, and I will see you next time and talk to you later. Bye for now.